Well, this is kind of a new usable toy that's, I'm not sure whether to call it a miter, sliding miter, or a radial arm saw for chopping metal. But it's a laminate floor cutter. They sell it with a little circular saw motor for cutting laminate floor. And the saw slides on this track, but I don't have any laminate floor. And I happened to see this in a junk shop, in a pawn shop, for 20 or 30 bucks. The saw is okay, but I just didn't need it for that. And I've been making metal tool holders for the mill stuff, the collets, the fly cutter, the boring bars. And this stuff is kind of heavy, so you can't make the holders out of wood. So I've been using this steel. It's a 3mm plate. But you can't bend it with the bending brake. And what I've found is if you cut a slot, you put a straight edge along the metal, and then you run the angle grinder along the straight edge, you can cut a channel and then bend it on the channel, fold it into a right angle, and then run a bead with the welder to seal up the channel so you get a nice bend without using a bending brake. And this metal is kind of substantial. The only trouble is with the straight edge on the piece of metal, you can clamp it, put your angle iron and the cutting wheel can sort of dance around. And it's very hard to get a uniform depth. So when I saw this thing in the good old pawn shop, I figured, what the heck? So what I did is I took off the circular saw motor, and I built a steel. This is a cradle that holds the angle grinder, this gray thing. It bolts onto the handheld handles for the angle grinder, and it secures it. And then the cradle is then bolted to the sort of the radial arm or the sliding miter tracks from the laminate. And what it allows you to do is to have a fairly good control over the angle grinder so it doesn't dance around. And on the back end, there were a couple of mounting holes for the circular saw that came with it. And what I was able to do is to switch it around, and I put a wing nut on one. So if I loosen up the wing nut, I can raise or lower the angle grinder, the blade in relation to the tabletop. And if I want the channel to be a certain depth, I just sort of set it and then tighten up the wing nut on the back, and then I can slip the channel without the angle grinder dancing around or losing my fingers. I don't have the guard on this at the moment. I have a spark guard. And this thing has 2 tracks, and it's extremely stable. So again, I don't know whether to call this a radial arm metal saw or a sliding miter. Well, it's not by cutting miters. You can adjust the angles down here at the bottom. So I'll just call it a sliding metal saw.